Look at what just happened off the coast of the Musandam Peninsula, because this is the moment the missile war on land officially spilled into the ocean. This Sunday morning, the commercial oil tanker named Skylight, a vessel flying the flag of Palau, was directly targeted right at the gateway of the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most vital economic arteries on the planet. Look at the details confirmed by Oman's Maritime Security Center. The vessel was targeted just 5 nautical miles north of Qeshm port. All 20 crew members, including 15 Indians and 5 Iranians, had to be evacuated in a cloud of black smoke. At least 4 people were injured and are receiving medical treatment. This was not a maritime accident. This was a deliberate message. The Skylight is a vessel already under U.S. sanctions, but that is less important than its location, right at the world's choke point. This attack occurred immediately after Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, broadcast a chilling warning over maritime VHF radio. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. No vessels are permitted to cross. Iran isn't just declaring the strait closed on paper. They are enforcing it with firepower. As the Skylight burns, it is not just a distressed vessel. It is a deadly stop sign sent to the entire global shipping industry. From Maersk to the biggest insurers in London, everyone is pulling back, leaving the Strait of Hormuz, which carries 20% of the world's oil, a vacant and burning waterway. What is happening in Yemen right now? Because while the Strait of Hormuz is burning, another door of the world in the Red Sea is being prepared to slam shut. Houthi forces have just issued an official declaration that they will resume all attacks targeting Israel and international shipping lanes. This is not just an empty threat. Leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi has called for a 1 million-man demonstration in the capital, Sana'a, to assert that Yemen is in a state of absolute readiness to stand with Iran. The Houthis declare that targeting U.S. military bases in the Gulf and across the world is a legitimate right. They argue that since these bases are directly involved in the aggression against Iran, they are legitimate targets. This means every U.S. base in Qatar, Bahrain, or the UAE is now in the crosshairs of missiles and drones from Yemen. This is the coordination of the axis of resistance. When Iran closes Hormuz, the Houthis will lock down the Red Sea, creating an unprecedented maritime pincer movement in modern history. The Houthi leader asserted firmly, "There is no cause for concern for Iran is strong and its response is decisive." Washington faces the reality that they are not just fighting a single nation, but a network of armed forces ready to act with rage and religious conviction. Tomorrow, when the 1 million-man demonstration takes place, the world will see a Yemen no longer standing on the sidelines, but one that has become a direct spearhead, piercing the very shipping lanes upon which the global economy depends. The hard numbers shaking energy markets from London to New York right now, because the Strait of Hormuz is no ordinary road, it is the aorta of the global economy. When Iran declared the strait closed and enforced it with the attack on the Skylight, they effectively strangled the world's supply. We are talking about more than 20% of global oil consumption, roughly 20 million barrels every single day suddenly blocked at a corridor less than 50 kilometers wide. It isn't just oil. Nearly 1/5 of global liquefied natural gas, much of it from Qatar, is also trapped behind Iran's firewall. Shipping giants like Maersk have suspended all future transits. Marine insurers have halted coverage for any vessel reckless enough to enter these waters. The result? A total standstill. Massive tankers like the KHK Empress or the Desh Abaman are performing desperate U-turns mid-transit. Brent crude prices are forecast to hit the $100 per barrel mark within hours, levels we haven't seen since the Ukraine conflict in 2022. Although 8 OPEC+ nations held an emergency meeting and decided to increase output by just over 200,000 barrels per day starting in April. That figure is a mere drop in the bucket compared to the 20 million barrel deficit the world is now facing. Washington and Israel may have launched precision strikes on land, but Iran has just launched a strike on the humanities wallet, transforming a military conflict into a global economic crisis with no easy exit. Look at the map of the Strait of Hormuz again, but this time, don't look at it as a vast body of water. Look at it as a deadly maze designed by nature and weaponized by Iran. Understand this. Closing this strait is not just about massive warships or grand naval fleets. Iran possesses an absolute geographic advantage that no global superpower can change through air power alone. Its system of strategic islands located right at the jugular of the world's energy flow. Islands like Hormuz, Qeshm, and Larak are not just barren strips of land. They are Tehran's unsinkable aircraft carriers. From these islands, the Revolutionary Guard, IRGC, can station mobile missile batteries, drone launchers, and fast attack boat teams just kilometers away from international shipping lanes. Furthermore, disputed islands such as Greater Tumb, Lesser Tumb, and Abu Musa provide Iran with high vantage observation points, allowing them to monitor and control every single movement within the strait. This is exactly why an attack like the one on the Skylight could be executed with such precision and speed. Iran doesn't need to send its entire fleet to sea. They only need to activate a missile battery hidden within the limestone caves of Qeshm Island. For massive oil tankers, which move slowly and clumsily through a narrow corridor less than 50 kilometers wide, escaping the aim of these islands is impossible. Here is the key point Washington is facing. To truly reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the United States would have to conduct an amphibious assault or seize these islands, a suicidal mission for any military force. These islands have turned the strait into an absolute no-go zone. The Pentagon has described Hormuz as one of the world's most important oil choke points, but they often forget to mention it is also the most militarily vulnerable. By controlling these strategic islands, Iran doesn't just hold the key to the global economic gateway. They hold a gun pressed against the temple of any nation dependent on Gulf oil. Tonight, as our surveillance satellites scan these waters, they don't just see ocean. They see a geopolitical trap that has been completely slammed shut. Look at what is happening tonight through the lens of history. Because the Strait of Hormuz is not a new battlefield, it is a place that holds the most horrific memories of human miscalculation. To understand why the attack on the Skylight and the closure of the strait are so terrifying, we must go back to the 80s, the time of the brutal tanker war between Iran and Iraq. In those years, hundreds of commercial ships were damaged or completely destroyed. But the peak of madness occurred in 1988. That was the year a U.S. frigate struck an Iranian mine in this very strait, triggering a large-scale military retaliation. And in that same year, a tragedy occurred that forever changed the relationship between the two countries. A U.S. warship shot down an Iran Air passenger jet, killing 290 innocent people. Why am I bringing this up right now? Because history is repeating itself at a dizzying pace. When tensions escalate in a narrow choke point like Hormuz, the line between an act of self-defense and a global catastrophe becomes thinner than ever. The presence of the U.S. Fifth Fleet in Bahrain and major bases in Qatar is creating a direct collision course with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, who have harbored deep resentment toward foreign military presence since Washington withdrew from the nuclear deal in 2018. Past incidents, such as Iran's seizure of a Portuguese-flagged container ship in 2024, or Iranian gunboats approaching a U.S. tanker earlier this year, were merely preludes. Tonight, with the closure of the strait declared and blood already spilled on the Skylight, we are standing on the edge of a new tanker war, but this time with hypersonic missiles and suicide drones. The ghosts of 1988 are returning, reminding us that in the Strait of Hormuz, a small explosion can lead to a massive war, and those who pay the highest price are always the global economy and innocent civilians. What is actually happening behind the oil price figures? Because the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is not just an energy sector issue. It is a seismic shock hitting the very nervous system of the global supply chain. When Iran strangles this choke point, they trigger a chain reaction from gas pumps in rural America to the most modern factory floors in East Asia. Over 80% of the oil and gas transiting Hormuz is bound for Asian markets. China alone currently purchases more than 90% of Iran's oil exports. This means that when the strait is closed, the world's largest manufacturing engines will begin to starve for energy within days. And folks, in a globally connected economy, When a factory in Shanghai or Seoul shuts down due to fuel shortages, consumers in London or New York will soon see their store shelves empty. And here's the fatal point. This disruption is happening in real time. Shipping lines cannot wait. Having tankers sit offshore or execute costly detours around the Cape of Good Hope doesn't just multiply shipping costs, it paralyzes just-in-time manufacturing schedules. Marine insurers have created an insurance void, making any voyage through this region a gamble that could bankrupt an entire corporation. From fuel stations beginning to adjust prices by the hour to production lines for electric vehicles or electronic components, everything is being strangled by a naval gun aimed from thousands of miles away. We aren't just talking about gas prices hitting $100. We are talking about the stagnation of a civilization that runs on the non-stop flow of Gulf oil. Look at the fragility of the so-called world order we have long believed in. Because the attack on the Skylight and the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz have exposed a brutal truth. A gun placed in the right spot can strangle the entire global economy. We have spent decades building a free trade system, yet we allowed it to depend on a corridor so narrow that a few missile batteries and drones can turn it into a deadly trap. This is no longer a war of ideologies, but a war for the survival of the supply chain. To reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the United States cannot rely solely on diplomatic deterrence or long-range airstrikes. They must face an unchangeable geographic reality, a battlefield that Iran has been preparing for nearly 40 years. Every military decision at this point carries the risk of igniting an energy crisis, the likes of which humanity has not seen since the 70s. And folks, here is the final bottom line. This conflict has moved far beyond military calculations between the U.S., Israel, and Iran. It has become a war against the stability of every household and every business on this planet. As we watch the streaks of fire on the Skylight and the empty ports in the Gulf, we are witnessing the end of an era of cheap and stable energy security. The question is no longer when the strait will reopen, but whether we have the strength to build a world that is no longer held hostage by geopolitical choke points like this.